farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
Bernard Tobin here at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, AGM. I am catching up now with Senator Rob Black, fair to say the hardest working senator in Canada. How are you doing, sir?
Good, thanks, Bernard. It's good to be here. It's been a whirlwind few days, for me anyways, and so it's good to be here and chatting with folks here.
Now, you just flew in from Edmonton. You were there yesterday checking out, how horses are loaded and shipped for transport. Part of the discussion around Bill C-355 banning live horse trade. This is something you deem necessary. You like to get out and see what the issues are and what's happening with a bill, with the legislation.
I think it's important, Bernard, to understand all sides of the issue. So I have talked to horse farmers who have horses that are sold live to Japan, and I've also talked to folks on the other side of the bill, animal justice, and to hear their comments. So over the last day and a half, I traveled to Edmonton to a horse farm. 99 horses were loaded onto trucks, and we followed them to the airport. They were offloaded into crates, 3 per crate. They were not crammed in there, pushed in there. There were 3 per crate. They had lots of room in those crates. And then those crates were loaded onto a Korean airline to be flown to Japan. I think it's important to know all sides of the issue before I can better stand up in the Senate chamber and talk about the issue.
You also mentioned, 7 years in the Senate now. And when you arrived, agriculture wasn't mentioned very often, but now it's weekly, almost daily. What does that tell us about, the work you're doing and works that groups like the OFA here are doing to get on the radar?
I think it's important work that they're doing. As I've told folks in the Senate chamber when I arrived there almost 7 years ago, agriculture was talked about once every 3 months or so, and today it is weekly, sometimes daily. Is it a bit of my work? Yes, I hope it is, but it's also organizations like OFA that are doing good stuff and making sure that we collectively know the issues that are before us. And there are a lot of issues in the Senate chamber now. We've had 3 C-234 that's gone by the wayside, back to the House now, but we've got C-275, C-280, C-282, and you've already mentioned C-355, which are all before the chamber right now. So there's a lot of activity going on, and I think it's important that I stand up and talk about those bills. I also think it's important that folks like OFA and other organizations get in front of my colleague senators as well.
Yeah, 234, obviously, C-234, the bill to remove, the carbon tax from natural gas and propane. It was a big fight. It's kind of languishing these days.
Yes, it's back in the House of Commons, and it's, to be honest, I'm not sure it's going to go anywhere. I think we'll see a prorogation or an election before it gets moved forward. We sent it back amended, which meant that it gutted the bill. I was not in favor of those amendments, and so now it languishes there. If the House opposed the amendments, then it would come back to us unamended, and we'd go through the process again.
Let's talk about something that you were really, really excited about, and it's got some legs, and that is the soil health report. A lot of discussion, a lot of questions about it from the floor here at OFA. Where does this go from here?
So the government replied to our 25 recommendations just a couple of weeks ago, and as I mentioned, 13 of those were in support, 9 were support in principle, and so it's incumbent upon the Senate, it's incumbent upon organizations like OFA to now hold the government's feet to the fire and move it forward. There are 25 great recommendations in my mind, and we can't. It's 40 years, as you've mentioned, since the last soil report. I've mentioned to groups that the UN says that today 30% of our soils are are degraded to the point around the world where we can't grow anything on them. If we don't do anything by 2050, 90% of the soils will be degraded. That's only 25 years from now. We've got a lot of work to do, and I hope some of these recommendations will help us lower that number and make sure that we have soil to grow our crops on.
Now let's talk about some of the other things that you're going to be doing in the Senate. You mentioned those in your speech today. You're going to do some work on wildfires in Canada. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Senate Ag Committee is undertaking a study on wildfires across Canada and its impacts on agriculture and forestry. And so we're just in the process of wrapping it up. We've had around 75 witnesses over the last year of study, less than a year of study, and so that report will go to writing in the early new year, and so we'll be tabling that in the new year. It'll contain recommendations for government to ensure that we maybe don't see the level of wildfires that we've had, or if we do, how can they be mitigated, especially with agriculture and forestry. After that one, we've got a study on the books that would study food security with respect to agriculture, and I think that's so important. Across, it's not just an ag issue; it's a mental health issue. It's a social issue, and so I'm looking forward to that study as well.
Final thought, and that is on something you also touched on, in land use planning. Certainly a long-standing issue and a hot button this day, especially with the Wilmot Township, Waterloo Region issue, and that industrial complex. What's your read of that situation, and what is the role of a senator and the Senate in a provincial jurisdiction?
Yeah, so that's my dilemma, is that it's a provincial jurisdiction. So I raised an inquiry a while ago on food security as it relates to land use planning. So that's where I can walk the line and talk, because food security is a Canadian issue. And so that's how I intend to work on that. I am working with MPP Schreiner and MP Tim Lewis from that area to see how the federal government can, and it would be a federal government thing, it wouldn't be a Senate thing, but how can we encourage governments of all orders to protect farmland. And so if we can do that through ensuring that food security is paramount, maybe that's a way that I can play a role.
Great stuff, Senator Rob Black. Always great to catch up with you. Always great to find you here, because you're always traveling around. Appreciate you stopping by and talking to Real Agriculture.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking and hearing from folks here today.